Dumelang Bagolo, and welcome to Africa's Bloom Room, planting seeds of growth as we all bloom together. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Proudly brought to you by the Afrika Network. Dumelang Bagolo, Dumelang Bagolo, Dumelang Bagolo. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. And let me officially introduce you to the first ever episode of Africa's Bloom Room. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to actually have the platform, the privilege, the honor to be able to, walk with you through this thing. What is the Bloom Room? Yeah, it's a vision I've always had in terms of podcasting level to just be able to speak or plant seeds of growth and encouragement in each and every area of our lives as we do it together. I am finding that this life thing has become very interesting and complex. And who is it? Brent Fayez once said that when describing Sunday, he was talking about how it's the realization that everybody else's life is just as complex as yours. So I figured, why don't we all grow together? Why don't we all bloom together? I'm going to be discussing outside of my poetry, rather, and all of the things that I am interested in and the things that I do. The most essential centerpiece, I guess, of this podcast is literally me unpacking situations that I've had to experience that have helped me and shaped me to grow and become a better person. But first things first, who are you and how are you today? Utsogile sentle. And thank you for who you are. It's an absolute pleasure to experience your spirit today. So today's episode is literally going to be dedicated to evaluating our communication styles and how we speak to people. I think that is I don't want to say focal point, but the most important thing that I've learned over this past week. A very valuable life lesson, I guess. Yeah, as you can see by the title, it is called Are You Listening? And it was very important to me to speak about evaluating our communication styles and whether we're actually listening when people are speaking or we're hearing our own voices when others are trying to drive their point across. So I feel the importance of this is just by simply asking the question, what does one-sided communication look like? And why is it important to listen? I learned this lesson a very hard way this past week when someone very close to me made me aware that when I'm trying to be heard, I behave like somebody who has all of the cards, where my point must be made and that it's final and it's finality. I use the information that that person had told me in confidence or made me aware of against them to make my point across. And I found that that cut a little bit differently because nobody wants to be made to feel a certain way or feel unheard. People often speak about listening being a skill, but I had to kind of sit down and figure out, is it a skill that we actively enhance, or have we, and I myself, deemed myself master of the skill because I think I know how to do it? So the importance of this is, are we really listening when people are speaking, right? As I sat back and evaluated the manner in which I was communicating with people, and not only this very close friend, close person, it left me disheartened for a couple of days. Because I thought I was communicating well, right? And in my defense, in the conversation and in the context, I thought I was just joking. But I realized that for me, needing a defense meant that something was wrong. Why did I feel I needed a defense in terms of the manner in which I was communicating? Maybe it wasn't just a joke, right? And realizing the manner in which I spoke to people stopped them from speaking to me freely and with true vulnerability really did cut deep. Because I know what that feels like. Nobody doesn't want to feel unheard. Nobody doesn't want to feel seen. So I had to sit back and realize that maybe the way I'm speaking doesn't come across the way I think it is. Being mindful to what the other person is hearing is very, very important. And as such, driving across this point that listening really is important. Yeah. Your voice doesn't need to be the loudest, and your opinions don't have to have the final say. I had to really sit back and be like, whoa, maybe you do want to be heard all of the time. And in me being heard, maybe I'm silencing other people's chances to really get their point across. So, exercising listening really enhances our ability to actually understand what people are saying and what place it comes from. So, something I have been kind of trying to implement myself, just in terms of the heart of blooming, is some listening exercises I've been doing that I think would benefit you too. We're all planting the seeds, and I hope this one blossoms with you. So, point number 1 on how to bloom in the listening sphere. Practice asking people, what did you mean by what you said? I think this allows for clarity if you're unsure or you feel like you've interpreted something in a way that is offensive to you. Yeah. This way you hear what they meant instead of assuming what they said. This is important. When you ask somebody for clarity on what do they mean by what they said, this gives room for you to process and to understand exactly what they meant before responding to what they said, which leads to point number 2. Listening to understand and not listening to respond. Oftentimes, I found myself listening because I have an answer in mind already. But pause. Take a second to process before responding or cutting someone off from finishing their sentences. Everybody wants to be heard, like I had said earlier. So take the time to listen to others, Bagolo. It's very important. And leading on to point number 3. Try to remember that we all have our complexities. I had referenced Brent Fayez earlier in speaking about how each and everybody's life is just as complex as the other. So everyone is going through their own life with their own complexes that they deal with on a daily basis. Some even try to avoid doing the self-work. Let it not be that your words or your responses are the reason why other people are triggered in a bad way. Speak the truth, yes, but do so with a level of sensitivity in your tone and in your projection. I think in doing so, we allow people to actually become themselves and not feel judged by the manner in which we project our feelings. I recently did a few live sessions with the ever so lovely lady. Her name is Kopano Mashike. And in doing these live sessions, we were tackling some sensitive topics. And in rewatching those live sessions, I realized that although the intent correct in us trying to make people aware about sensitive topics such as the prostitution complex that we're having in our country, my tone in some of my comments may have been offensive to people who are dealing with or battling with such issues in their daily lives and dealing with having to make those certain decisions, right? That made me sit back and realize that tonality is important when communicating something very sensitive. Tonality and the manner in which we're relaying the message is important. So I would like this first episode of The Bloom Room to be dedicated to myself. To be dedicated to myself in order to be cognizant of listening more than wanting to be heard. To be cognizant of making sure that we are sensitive to the manner in which other people receive the message that you're trying to say. It's only well received when it's well said. Being cognizant of other people's emotions, vulnerability, and sensitivities allows us to open up to people in a way that they can hear us better. And hence, the Bloom Room. As I'm growing up in year number 23, I am realizing that it's very important to move forward with empathy, to move forward with love, and not only that, but become a true vessel. And in being a vessel, it means that there can't be any blockages hindering the messages from Papa God or the messages that I am trying to relate to people to walk in love and to help other women, other men, other people, and everyone in general, kids, old people, young people, to bloom in the right way. To bloom in a way that is respectful to everyone, but also to bloom in a way that allows for people to really be themselves, their true selves. So Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bagolo, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining episode 1 of Africa's Bloom Room. See you next week for the next episode where we're unpacking and discussing more things that will help us plant the seeds of growth and become better than we were the day before. Blooming in every season all together. Thank you so much, Bagolo. Love and light.